Well, welcome everybody to another episode, and today we're very, very lucky to have a special guest. Jesse, welcome.
Thank you so much, guys.
Welcome, Jesse.
I know Jerome is dying to dive into your game idea there. We'd love to hear your pitch, but could you briefly tell us a little bit about you?
Sure. So my name is Jesse Ross. I live in Texas. I started playing board games a couple of years ago and fell hard in love with them. And I started watching a lot of YouTube channels about board game reviews and people celebrating the board game hobby, tabletop games. But I looked for some better quality videos that I was seeing from some of the vloggers that I see and follow on YouTube. And so I set out to make a YouTube channel that would celebrate board games with a little bit better production quality. So that's what I'm aiming for.
Well, I mean,
Yes,
it's
and
early
that's
in your
how
channel,
I found you. Yeah.
and you've definitely achieved it. So good, congratulations. Yeah, I look forward to seeing more content from you.
Well, thank you.
Yes.
I completely consider myself an amateur. I'm learning. I'm teaching everything to myself. So hopefully I can continue to get better as well.
Awesome.
You're doing fine. But we have the same background. I was also looking for a lot of videos in the beginning when I started designing, and I had the same hankering for a more hands-on approach on board game design through YouTube. Everybody was talking about theory, and I was like, yes, but how do you actually make it? And that's very sparse in resources. So with George, I started this just at the minimum to share ideas and to talk about board games, and that's talking about it makes more ideas spring up. And that's why I want to hear about your game design. What are you working on now? I saw the first two videos, but I'm very curious on what the grand idea is.
Sure. And I completely feel comfortable talking about it. There's no spoilers. I don't have a mentality of spoiling anything. For me, I'm about to post my third video about this game that I'm designing. There's no code name for it. I don't even have a name, but it's an exploration/adventure game that has a geographical distance and moving nature to the board game. So I want people to have a top-down view of the map that they're exploring. And right now it just has a general theme of like you're exploring the wilderness and mountains and going out on your own intentionally into the woods to find your personal goals and to accomplish those personal goals. So it has a very much more lighthearted theme to it, and almost like you're going out into the woods to find out more about yourself and to accomplish those personal goals. So the geographical nature is I want you to be moving a meeple and a character piece throughout the map, flipping over hex tiles. And those hex tiles tell you what actions you can take on that map or that location. And you're also drawing cards from an adventure deck, and you also have like tokens that represent like walkie-talkies that you come across or that you find, and that allow you to talk to other hikers and explorers around the board. So the idea is still very loose, and the mechanics are just now coming together in my head, where I feel like they could actually work and I could start developing the game. Because right now, the first two videos that you've seen are just me talking about ideas in my head that are floating around. I don't even have a physical, workable game at this point, but I'm getting very close to that point, which is the exciting part, right? So I think the development process or the design process of thinking about all the mechanisms, and when you finally get to the point where you can start playing things around and learn what could improve and what is great about the game, that's really exciting. So,
But that's also the part where then it becomes work. For me, I told George before, that's the fun part. And then when you have all the ingredients and just making it work is the very hard part. And it's playtesting and it's trying out and it's not being afraid of throwing things away. But what I found interesting, and because we share this also, is exploring is one of my favorite things in board games. So I put some exploration games behind me, like Eclipse, Xia, and Seven Continents. which in my opinion, Seven Continent is a game that you should really check out, and because it has a lot of the exploring thing. And immediately the thing that is so difficult about exploring, if you want to play this game 10 times and you want to keep the exploration feeling, like I want to keep, like every time, the fifth time I play the game, is it still exploring, or am I looking for a certain tile that I want to have? Do I already know which one is the best one, or can I have, are there 10 strategies, like this time I can go for this path, or I can become a botanist, or I can become some kind of wildlife spotter or photographer, or whatever you want to do in your game. How do you keep it fresh exploring, and how, that's for me in the exploration game, that's one of the challenges, that it's not you play this 3 times, I've seen every tile, and it goes into the cupboard forever. So how do you look on, what's your take on that?
For me, it's funny that you mentioned Seventh Continent, and other people have mentioned those in the comments of my videos, that game, Seventh Continent. I've since looked a lot more into it. I haven't played Seventh Continent, and unfortunately that's the case for a lot of games out there, and I have to do just visual research on videos.
You cannot buy them all or play them all.
But I actually mentioned that game in my video that's coming out in the next couple of days. So I talk about that, and how that game is based on a deck that you're going through that is so expansive, and there's so many cards to that game that you really do find a new experience every time. But they've done such a great job of making that experience different every time that you play it, that's something that I'm trying to figure out in my game, of how do I do that uniquely. I'm not going to rely on a numbered adventure deck where you're being told to go to card 56 in the game, and that'll bring you to the next story plot throughout that gameplay. For me, I want it to be more organic, where you're drawing random cards, but the cards that you're drawing give you a lot of different options on that geographical board. And yes, the third time that you play it, you may know that the lake tile hasn't been flipped over, and that's something that could help you in the game if you get to the lake somehow and cash in a token. Those are just ideas. But the cards that you have in your hand, the locations that other players are on throughout the game, that makes the gameplay different. So I'm trying to make the mechanics fit a variety of gameplays for multiple games down the road. So I'm trying to rely more on the mechanics than the cards, making that experience different.
Jesse, I just wanted to say that from what I've seen so far through your videos, you're a similar designer like me, in the sense that you really put a lot of emphasis on the feeling. And Jerome and I talked about this in a previous episode, about the feeling you want players to have when they experience the game, and they leave and they come back because of certain feeling or things that they want to experience. And I'm all for that as well. And I think, obviously game mechanics are super important, but I have loved to see you explore your theme so far. And to the games that you have been mentioning or tried, I wanted to add a couple more. You may have already tried Parks. You may have already tried Robinson Crusoe. Okay. What's interesting is we really, in my group, my husband especially loves Parks. He wants to play it all the time. He's not a board gamer, but he loves hiking and loves nature and things like that. So I think what he's looking to play Parks for is to gain that similar experience on the table, even though he's not outside. But what I found with Parks especially, I am missing all those things you mentioned that you want to achieve with your game, which is those personal goals, that feeling. Because even though you have 2 little hikers you're playing with, I don't know if you've played it, but it just, after a while, just becomes, it's a great game, but it becomes very, I don't know. I know what to expect every time I play it. There's a little bit of randomness with the tiles, coming out in random ways, but the thing, in that game does not give me that feeling of exploration whatsoever for some reason. But Robinson Crusoe, I think, though,
if I can interject, we're still talking about Parks.
Of course,
A lot of the feeling that you get from Parks is through the artwork and through the animal meeples.
For sure.
That gives you the sense of traveling, because bare bones, the mechanics, it's like Tokaido, you go as far as you want, but you miss out on things.
Yeah.
It's like if you go hiking with someone who wants to hike fast, then you're missing all the beautiful things around you. But
Yeah.
that's a little bit the game.
Speaking
And for
of,
me,
oh, sorry, Jerome. I was
it's
gonna.
all about the artwork. Parks is more about the artwork than the gameplay for me as an
Yeah.
experience for the game. Yeah.
Speaking of missed things, though, with parks, I feel like the photography aspect was a little missed because they're so tiny, and you could have had a really great experience for that. I know, like Tokaido. You mentioned Tokaido. They have like the panoramas you can build, and that sort of thing adds to like, hey, I went there and I took these pictures, and but yeah. And anyway, I mean, Parks is a great game. I don't want to obviously talk down about Parks in any way, shape, or form. I was just trying to hone into your exploration.
We don't do that here at Your Game is Garbage.
But I was going to say the most I've ever felt the feeling that I think you were describing in your videos that you want to achieve was Robinson's Crusoe, because every time I play it, it's a very difficult game, but every time I try to play it, I get this. I can't wait to see what the next tile going to show me and things like that. And I think one of the ways they made it so you can play multiple times and still discover new things is those multiple scenarios. That was an interesting take, I thought, with them, because they can still keep making them. I downloaded one about King Kong and like different things, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah. I agree. I mentioned Parks in my next video. I mentioned Robinson Crusoe briefly.
Robinson is more a surviving game than a
exactly
game for me,
and that's what I say. And
it's very you're drowning the whole game.
Yeah,
the part of feeling I chase.
Yeah, the map portion is what I was specifically talking about. Yeah, that reminded me of it.
Right. I even mentioned in my next video, like I felt relieved that whenever I saw Robinson Crusoe for the first time, when people started pointing it out as it has similarities, because it has hex tiles, it has dice, it has cards, but it is a survival game, and that is the feeling that you come away with when you play that game. My game is not about survival. It's about feeling emboldened to go out and explore, to be thriving out in the wilderness. I don't want you to be stressed out because you don't have enough water for your next turn. I want you to be worrying about, like which direction do I want to go in now? So that's the feeling that I'm aiming for.
So you know what feeling you want to give your players? What mechanic have you tied to that feeling? I know you talked about flipping hexes and stuff. How did you translate the feeling to the mechanical aspect of your game?
So right now, whenever you're moving throughout the board, again, it's top down. And as you're moving your person throughout the board, you're flipping hex tiles that you can land on. And those hex tiles have different locations on them. So every single turn, you have a choice to stay in the same spot, to venture out into new locations and flip new hex tiles, or to go back to other locations that you've explored or other people have explored and flip those tiles. So every single turn you have that choice to go elsewhere, stay in the same spot, go where you've been before.
And is it with an action allowance, or is it how do you count it, or how mechanically?
Right now I'm playing with the idea of like you can only move one hex at a time, or maybe two hexes at a time. So I think a large part of that feeling of being out in an expansive landscape is that it takes you a long time to get to one place to the other. I don't want that to be too long, obviously, because I don't want people to be drudging through, but I want them to think about strategically, if I don't start making my way over to that lake in the next couple of turns, then I won't make it there in time to be a viable winner at the end of the game. So stuff like that. Also, geographically, I want you to be thinking about, if I'm going to start ascending to the top of the mountain, going to the center of the board where this peak mountain is, that's dangerous to climb up the mountain. It gets more and more precarious as you go closer to that center of the board. And if you don't roll a certain number, or you don't have enough tokens in your hand, somehow you may miss that turn of getting to the next center piece, and you may have to lose an item. You may, thematically, you may like drop your walkie-talkie down a crevasse, and you won't have that anymore, and you can't communicate to other players, or you can't take advantage of the stats that they have in front of them. So that's some of the theme there, where there is consequences because you're outside, and I want to simulate some sort of risk and danger and reality there, but it's not over the top. It's just like I may lose an item, but that item that I lose is really consequential in if I'm going to win or not.
But you're more and more pitching a race to the top game now. If the board is always up to a mountain, because what I liked in your first pitch in your videos was that everybody could go their own way, and that the victory wasn't like measured in discover the forest as fast as you can, but that you all each had your own goal. And I think the danger of everybody has to go to the top of the mountain is like, oh, everybody's going to be a climber, but it could be one person's goal, and other people could do other things, like become good at some kind of certain craft or survival, even whatever you want to make it. But that's appealed to me more than what it was just
and
now.
I feel like, you know, that other goal where you could just go and live in the woods because you're ready to retire.
Yeah.
That was actually pretty funny. I also liked your component upgrade for the cave.
Jerome, you're right. And I kind of want to stop using that example of getting to the top of the mountain so much that people think that's what the game is about, because that's one of a few goals that one player could have. So getting to the top of the mountain may be a goal for 2 players in the game, but it may not be a single goal for another player, the third player. So they may have different goals that they've set out for themselves. But I just want that reality. If you do decide to even move across to the other edge of the board, and you're going to take the path over the mountain, then that's a consequential path. So that's just the feeling that I'm trying to aim
You
for.
can be a risk taker one game, and 3 weeks later be someone completely different. And that's what I commented.
I really
on
like
YouTube,
that too.
As well, is that what I found out of other exploring games is that the tiles that you flip kind of dictate your path. If you find a lot of flowers, then you become a botanist. If you find a lot of rabbits or stuff to hunt, maybe you become a hunter. So have you thought about that? How much information do you want to put on each tile? And can there be different resources on the tiles for different strategies?
I want the information on each of the tiles to be very minimal. So, for example, this may not even come through, but this is like a cave tile. It's a tiny tile, and I know this is just a quick tile that I've cut out to do some demonstrations. But so that's a cave tile. This has a tent on it. So there's tiles that have just simple icons on it. However, I'm playing around with the idea of, as you're laying down tiles, the edges or the corners, so as 3 tiles match together, maybe those corners match together in a way, and you're strategic on how you lay it down so that you can place an extra location. So maybe there's a cabin there if you're able to maneuver the tiles around, and you lay down 3 matching corners, and you can lay down a cabin of some sort. So I only want a single icon and maybe edges of terrain that you can match together that give you another.
But even background or nature icons can be, if you put a green or a gray or a blue background, is also a resource. It's also some kind of things. Or if some of the edges aren't passable or whatever, that's all information on the tile. You can do your middle icon, and that's the most important thing, but the background also is an indicator of stuff. So you don't have to cram it full of icons. You can, even the color of the tent can be some kind of indicator. You can have different color tents. You can really go very far with it, with simple iconography. Yeah.
And Jesse, that reminds me of Tapestry and how interesting it is to try to match, even, you know, halfway through one of the sides of the hex is a different, terrain type, and then that's how you can combine and get points.
I'm gonna drag in one of my previous prototypes
Yeah, you do that,
But
Jerome.
continue, George.
I wouldn't
Sorry, I
expect
interrupted
anything
you.
less from Jerome. By the way, as you could probably tell, I'm in a similar position as you. Like really early, I have some designs and some sketchbooks and things like that. But I really look up to Jerome because obviously Fujikoro, like he and his brother have do some amazing work. So he's always like full of prototypes and things that I don't have any of my games in a stage in. So it's always really exciting to see. But my challenge for you to ask you is I always, because I love themes so much, do you think if you did do that and it did matter how people are placing the tiles, it becomes more of instead of exploring and finding things, does it become more of I'm a god and I make this landscape any way I want? Like, does it take away from the theme at all?
Possibly. That's a real question that I've been asking myself, because if I add that mechanic, that's one other thing that someone's taking time on their turn to figure out. And that is sort of a god mechanic where you get to choose which direction this landscape is facing. And but I want it to be simple, like Tapestry, where it's the way you put it down, and when you do put it down, it only gives you like very minimal benefits. It's not like it makes a huge difference in the game.
Yeah, I like
But
that.
if I make it a huge difference in the game, then people will take longer on their turn to figure that out. So that's a great question.
No, I really think there's something there too. I think because that also makes it different every time you play. It's a new environment. It's like you went to a different part of the world and you explored it.
That's one of the aspects in the exploration in Fujikoro, was that I wanted to make the placement of the tiles was important, and I wanted to mimic the test with small children. If you give a small child a cookie now, or you say wait 10 minutes and then you get 3 cookies, the child will always say, give me the cookie now. So I wanted to make the exploration. You have, where is it? So if you were here and you would explore from there, you could put it like this. It would have to match. And then you could put the best resources near you. But because in the game the volcano starts to erupt, you have to find your way back. And if you put a cookie near you when you go out, then the way back will be much harder. And that's one of the aspects that I wanted to put in. Like after 2 plays, you would see like, oh, maybe I should wait for the cookie so that the second half of the game will be a little bit easier. But it's something that you learn. It's not written anywhere. It's you put the tiles and then, but in the playtest, I had a lot of people that were like in the second half, why did I put it like this? This is horrible. I'm never gonna make it back. And I was like, in myself, I was perfect. That's exactly what I want. That's what I want. But on the
Jerome,
reverse
I'm
side of
curious.
these tiles, yeah.
Jerome, I'm curious, like, what were you thinking about whenever you were creating that mechanic of matching those multiple hex tiles around each other, and you figuring out what kind of feeling is that going to give to players playing the game?
Well, the main feeling of the game I wanted to be get in, take as much stuff, and get out. So that was the basic thing, and I wanted the players to panic to get out of the volcano alive. So in the beginning, all my playtests were: if you don't get out of the volcano, you're dead. You have 0 points. And people didn't like it. But for me, having the option to die and having that stress was vital to the end game stress of getting to the middle, because it gave a lot of fiero, it gave a lot of emotion. And when I took that out, when one of the tactics became just stay in the volcano and try to conquer as many dragons, slay as many dragons, and the people who do get out will tell your story to the shogun and you will get points that way. For me, it was a little bit of a cop-out, but I had to do it because people didn't like to die in the volcano. Because then a 2-hour game was like, I have 0 points. Oh my god. Yeah. But another mechanic I was working on for the follow-up for Fujikoro at Sea, for Sikoro, was these kind of tiles. And you can see that because it's with ships, you could sail, but you could only sail like straight through. So you could only go like this or like this or like this, but you could never sail backwards. So when I made these little islands, it was very handy that you can't go there, and it just blocks everything by blocking one corner. And I think it's interesting for your design as well, this simple thing, but even if it's not with chips, but these simple kind of things can tell you where you can go and where you can't go. And the trees, if you're on the space with the trees, you could harvest wood. So on the trees is artwork, but it tells you on that space you can take wood. And then you had cubes lying around that would reference to a card, and would be, so all the green cubes on the board would tell you take a card from the green deck, and that would be like you find a wreckage, or you find treasure or whatever, or you find a mission, and it would be like escort missions, or bring this to there, or sell this to this person, whatever kind of adventure piratey things. But I've this idea I found at random, like what if I do this? So these kind of things, and that's what I wanted to come to you with, because you also doodle on hexes, and those things give you ideas, just drawing stuff.
Yeah, I really like that idea, and I think that's really ingenious to because the distance is important. If I'm wanting for this to be a geographical exploration game, like I want people to, be strategic about how long they're taking around the board. So if I put an obstacle in their way of moving their piece, and they're going to have to go around it, and that's something they need to consider. So that's a great idea of using that little island location.
I would advise against one move, one step. Seven Continents solves that pretty well. It has a certain cost to flip a card, but moving two cards you've already flipped is quite cheap. So you can double your way back if you hit a dead end. So those kind of things are interesting to figure out. Yeah.
I may do something. I think that's good advice, seriously, because I don't want it to be a drudge of if I'm going to get all the way across the board, it's going to take me literally 13 turns. But as I'm exploring, maybe the exploration mechanic is that if I'm going to flip a tile, then I end my turn. But if I'm not going to flip a tile and I'm exploring in other places that are already flipped, then I can take up to 3 movements. Because I know those areas, they've already been explored. There's nothing unfamiliar to them, to me. So maybe that's an area that direction I could go in.
Another question was, George, you go.
Sorry, I know we have all these questions for Jesse. So I just actually, this question is for both of you. Jesse's game is all about this experience of finding yourself, being alone in all these incredible places and exploring, and a very positive feeling, but also very isolating. When you're playing with other players, do you think a game like an exploration game like this, should it have some kind of interaction between players? Like, I've played games where you just take your turn and then you just wait for your turn to come back because all you care about is your own turn. Do you think that your game would benefit if there was some kind of, I know that you mentioned walkie-talkies, or, I mean, thematically that's really cool to pick up a card and hear somebody. It doesn't have to be another player, but or maybe like geocaching or something. There's something you find, I don't know. But as far as interacting with the actual players around the table, have you thought of ways that you could do that, or do you want to have that? Do you think it would benefit or hinder the experience?
I haven't figured out a good way to do that, but I do want more player interaction. Yes, your adventure out in this landscape will feel mostly isolating, but I want you to have some clues and reminders that there are people out there elsewhere too that you may come across eventually. So maybe the things that you leave at a campsite because you can't carry them with you are going to be beneficial for the other players, and that gives you good karma in the game for other players to help you out as well. Or that's leaving items that are useless to you that might be useful to other people. So things like that, but I'm still figuring that out. I don't know what that might be.
That would be very interesting. You know what this reminds me of, strangely, is a video game called Death Stranding, which is also a very isolating experience, except you are sharing the world with other players online. And you just mentioned a couple of things that, like, in the video game, you create a ladder to reach a really high spot that otherwise you'd have to climb or you're not able to, and other people can use that ladder, like that kind of thing. That would be interesting, yeah, if you're interacting with players that way. And I'm assuming it will all be positive. There'll be a betrayer amidst.
It can be, yeah. But one interesting thing would be to make it a free move to someone else, even if they're at the other side of the map. Like, if only that would be the interaction, that's very valuable. If you find something at the other side of the map that's important for me, even it comes if maybe a small cost, I could move all the way to you. Then you would see some kind of cooperation between players.
And Jesse, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was thinking, so I do want my gameplay to be mostly positive, but obviously it's a competitive game, and you want to win. You don't want the advantage that you give to another player, push them over to the edge and win over you. So maybe if you do leave items at the campsites and someone picks it up, then you gain points from that. So it may be in your best interest to leave items for other players because it benefits them and benefits you at the same time. So that could be.
Yeah.
But those are things that you will find out in playtesting if it works or not. Because in your mind, all these things can work, but the minute you put it up to playtesters, they break it and they're like, oh, you don't think it's fun to leave stuff behind for other people? And they're like, no, but can I leave a trap behind? Like, maybe. It's always like that, yeah.
Well, what's the Camel Up or Camel Cup or whichever the title determined to be the final title? You leave those, they either can move the camel forward or it's like an oasis or a desert, but it belongs to you somehow. But then every time somebody steps on it, they gain a coin. People love using that. Whenever we play Camel, they go for that. I'm not too big on those, but it's funny that so gameplay,
I played it for the first time a week ago, I think.
Oh, really? But Jesse, that dice mechanic you mentioned in your last video, the nighttime one, I fell in love with that. I don't know why. The theme of just spending, camping at night and just any of those things that the dice could bring out that happens, all of those were just so well thought out. I don't know, very thematic and also gameplay wise, I feel, because I also love dice in games. I really agreed with you on that part in the video, and I think there's definitely something there that I feel is awesome.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I want the nighttime phase to be fun too. I don't want it to be scary at night necessarily.
Right.
But yeah, that dice is something that you roll, and if you roll a full moon, then it's bright enough at night that you can actually explore during the nighttime phase, and everyone gets that same benefit.
Yeah.
So you don't feel like the chance of the dice or the randomness of the dice is only advantaging one player or disadvantaging others. So it's benefiting everyone at the same time.
But it could be something small you can prepare for. Like I'm thinking about roulette, that you put the chips on the right number, and then when you roll it, you get an added benefit, or for example. But it could be the other way around as well. I suppose I have night vision goggles and somebody rolls a full moon, and then it's like, oh, everybody has the same advantage as me, even though I had the night vision goggles. It can be as simple as that. Yeah. I
liked your resilience aspect, though. Even though negative things happen, like the rain or I don't know, a bear attack or whatever, you gain resilience. So you always manage to find a positive spin that always goes back to your original value or core value of the game.
Something that it makes me think about the card game in the trenches of World War One, The Grizzled.
The Grizzled, yeah.
It has also that weather aspect and the aspect of if we play too many of these cards, then that happens. It could also be something that can inspire you to make for player interaction. Like, I hope you don't find another bear, or we all get attacked if we're next to a bear, something like that. I don't know. Or if I love brainstorming like this, but suppose that George is next to a small bear, like a baby bear, and they're like, oh, George is fine. But you turn over Mama Bear, and then like George is, oh my God, no, she's gonna come over here. Like, please don't. Yeah, I have to get away from this baby bear. I can maybe take another turn to take a picture, like take a risk to stay longer. And other players will maybe be like, oh, we have to go look for the bear. It will be hilarious if George gets attacked by the bear. That can also be fun player interaction and semi-friendly, because you're not attacking actively. You're just making a bear go towards you. Yeah, it could be fun. Yeah.
And it was interesting too that you mentioned about, obviously it's an isolated experience, but maybe you do meet other players at certain campsites or during a night phase or something, or like hot springs or something. It reminds me of Tokaido, and then you always stop and meet at a certain like restaurant or whatever it is, and then you interact that way because the first person there gets the food, gets the choice of the food or whatever. There might be a lot of different ways to have player interaction.
I think even if it's a pure exploration game, and if that's the core feeling, I think moving over tiles that are already explored should be free. I think that's something that's because moving to somewhere where you've already been will be a drag, in my experience.
Yeah. I agree. That's something I'll
making stuff free is very counterintuitive in the beginning as a designer, because you always want players to play and do stuff or pay stuff to do things, but sometimes you have to say, go for it, knock yourself out, because the core mechanic will be flipping the tiles, and if that's the most fun in the game, then it should be about that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe in a nighttime phase you could teleport. I hate teleporting, but walk back to a tent or your tent, or get back together or stuff like that. You could even make it a campfire storytelling mechanic where everybody comes back and say like what I found or what I encountered, and George will show his scars of the bear and stuff like that.
Your inspiration was also Zelda, which I found very interesting. And one of the things I liked about that game is all those random things that you had, like, those extra little quests and things that you had to do. Like, I know you would have like the major goals in your game, but there was one, for instance, you had to go up a certain way to look down, and then you see sort of where you had to go next to find a treasure, which was like, it was like land but shaped as a eagle, I think. It was very interesting, but it's just little things that, whether you get through walkie-talkies or you find little hints or things like that, mysterious side to the exploration could be interesting too. Again, brainstorming, but I just like little things, like I guess the idea of gameplay here would be like mini goals to achieve alongside your major goal. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. And maybe there's, on a tile, there could be a lookout, almost like a fire watch lookout that's been abandoned, and people can use it if they need to. So it's a tower in the woods that if you land on that space, you can see out from everywhere, and somehow that gives you double movement on your next turn. And if you could explore 2 tiles on your next turn because you started from that spot.
I like that.
So yeah, that's a good idea. And the Legend of Zelda, all those little moments of like the rewards of just getting to the top of a hill and finding out that there's one of those little seeds that you get. I want to create little pleasurable moments like that in my game if I can. It may be complicated to do so, and I may throw that out at the end of the day, but that's a lovely feeling to aim for.
I love that.
Flipping a card or reading a card or flipping a little token on a tile is one of the most gratifying things that can be. And other players at the table will actively ask, like, what did you find? And this one I can keep secret, or this one is for everyone. And then it can be, that's also a player interaction. If, for me, on your previous question, George, if every player's turn is interesting for everyone, that for me is a very good game.
Yes.
If I see players stopping out between turns of other players and just care about their own turn, then the game needs more work.
Yeah, I mean, that could be interesting too, where you mentioned earlier, Jesse, that you would have like 3 options. You can stay put, you can move forward to a new tile, or go back. It would be interesting if somebody if you found something in a particular tile that was secret and you couldn't share it with everyone, then it might drive someone's pique their interest and they want to go and
Or
see what you
goal,
found too. Yeah, like that could be interesting too.
Yeah. Or you draw a card and it has a map on it, and that allows you to flip a tile in the middle of the board that's not connected or adjacent to anything else. So you literally get to pick from the entire space of the board and say, I'm going to flip this tile and put it right there. And you're like, oh, cool. So that's a place that I can aim for now.
Yeah.
So there's a board, and you because we're talking about flipping tiles the whole time, but since the tiles aren't that big, I was thinking more of an expanding map that you're creating yourself, like Eclipse, for example. But instead of a grid where you put on the tiles or you flip the tiles, because it sounds fiddly to set up, or I don't know, because flipping the tiles of a preset map doesn't seem very necessary. You could even pull it from a stack and even choose which stack you take from or whatever. It can be a mechanic in its own, but that's something you will discover through playtests.
That's what I plan to do. I want the board to be empty of tiles. You're not flipping tiles that are already there. You're pulling from a stack on the side. So it's empty until you fill it up.
It's cheaper to make as well. But I was thinking about if some of the sides of the hex are blocked, it can also be player interaction. If I find a tile with a beautiful flower that Jesse the botanist wants, I could make it so that it's harder for you to get to. So I could put a cliff between me and the flower. I don't get it either. But if you move to me, you still have to go around to find it. And you have to be lucky, and parentheses, to get to there. So that's also a little interaction. I used it as well in Fujikoro, that you put lava between you and someone else or stuff like that, to make it harder for people to reach their goals. And those aren't take that mechanics in my opinion, because it's like a passive aggressive move. It's not I'm gonna hit you and you lose your flashlight. That's not something I like, or most people like.
Jesse, the idea of having a board, and would it already show kind of like the placement of where hex tiles could go, I'm assuming? And then you would just be revealing them depending on where you start on the board, that kind of thing. Another benefit to that would be like if you did go up to the fire tower or whatever, and then you noticed maybe billowing smoke, or you heard a weird animal call, or I don't know, whatever it could be, or you notice like a waterfall in the distance or something you want to go explore. Maybe that could be, the card would say, 5 hexes away from your current position, you can reveal a new tile, or place a specific tile or whatever, because then you have the way to do that. You have somewhere to place it. But it's also interesting. I've seen, like, what is the Deep Vents game? That's also a new one where you just create as you go. You create the map as you go. There's no board to place things on. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see what you find during your playtesting, and if being constricted to a board.
Yeah, I think it allows for different stories as well. It could be long-shaped islands that you're creating because of certain goals, or a blob where nobody actually moves but digs in to explore the tiles more, something like that. The shape of the world you're creating is a story in itself.
Jesse, I was curious about your network of friends or people nearby. Do you have a solid, or a place even that you can go to once you have a prototype? One of the things here in Calgary, they have like a Monday night where game designers can bring their game prototypes and they give feedback to each other. Do you have like a network of other game designers where you live, or people who are interested in this?
I don't have that extensive of a network, and here in Waco, Texas, I don't think we have like a playtesting group. I have really great friends who we play a lot of games together, and they also have been designing their own games, and like the Survivor TV show, they've been trying to design a board game about that. I know there's already a Survivor board game, but they're trying to make a better one. But that's just fun that we can chat and get excited about board game design together. So they're actually my playtesting group, just the friends that I hang out with. But since I'm now entering more holistically into this board gaming design community, I want to get involved more. So I'm thinking about like the next time I can go to Kansas City to Jamie Stegmeier's design days, or go to the other conferences that they have for game design. Like, I would love to do that now that I'm getting more into the hobby.
That's
I
awesome.
think the next step is have your game play tested by people you don't know, and you just have to find gaming clubs or get-togethers in your neighborhood. That's how I do it, and it's always very scary and very stressful to have people you don't know play your prototype, and then be looking at the prototype and then at you like, what are you doing here? Oh,
It's very humbling. Yeah.
yes, it's one of the good things, and it progresses your design by leaps and bounds. Yeah, you immediately, especially your exploration game, you will see immediately what people want to do, what they like to do, and then it might not be what you think, and also the danger, because you have one specific group. In the beginning, it's fine to play test with your friends, but there's so much variety in play styles and what people like and what people don't like, that the more people you get to play one game, the more information you have. Because I have very non-aggressive friends to play my games, and then when I get a gaming group by accident that's very aggressive in their play style, they break my game immediately, and it's like, oh my god, I didn't foresee this. Yeah.
And in the spirit of helping each other, and this, I mean, that's one of the reasons I like doing this with Jerome, is if you have anything that you think, Jerome or I could help you with, whether it's resources, whether it's links, or whether it's, like next steps in different phases, like I will bug Jerome very much about like his experience with a publisher, like those kinds of things, and events,
with
things
one
like
publisher.
that. Well, hey, that is a lot more experience than I have, but but I'm also like, here in Calgary, I'm very close with Roxley. They're one of my clients as well, but we're also very close friends, and all the designers that work with Roxley, and they bring their prototypes to my game days. Well, not since COVID, obviously, but it's just a really, really super helpful experience for me to be a part of these playtests. They're not for my games, but just to see the kinds of things that they look for and things. And it's ironic because these designers are so into they've been designing. That's all they've been doing. And I asked them if they've played any of the new games that I buy. And it's like one of those realistic things that you have to realize that once you get into it, then you'll be playing more of your games than you will any other game. But yeah, no, if there's anything that we can do to help, Jerome, you're full of resources, I know.
If your game is print and playable, or even I can draw your game myself to play test, that will be great. But I think, and I don't know if I have to invite you here in a couple of months to see the progress, because we will see it on your channel anyway.
That's right.
And I will. And I look at it. I look forward to your next episode. Yeah.
Well, thanks, guys. I really appreciate that.
The same, but I'm not progressing in my design.
Well, start making public YouTube videos about it, and then you'll probably feel the pressure to do so.
Well, but this one I made before. And in February, it was in the stages of playtesting, so I cannot progress this one. Well, I'm playing it tonight, but it needs more playtesting, and I can't evolve it anymore on my own. Yeah. And the other one I'm designing, I can't talk about it in public. So those videos will be posted in 3 years. But yeah.
And when we look back and see how young we were, Jerome.
Well, I looked at the first one like half an hour ago. It's funny because already I can see that the game changed a lot. Yeah. Not.
So Jesse, what's the next step for you then? Next step is fiddle around with more of those mechanics to dial in the feeling, like we've been talking about, and that is what is my main aim for the game, is to get that feeling that I'm grasping at. So if I can do that at least by myself and feel comfortable about the ensemble of things that do create that feeling, then I can start playtesting with my close friends. And
Yeah. Don't wait too long with playtesting, because if you're trying to figure out one aspect of your game, go playtest it as soon as possible, is my advice. Especially if it's something new and complicated. If it's deck building, then you don't really have to test it because it's something that's ubiquitous. But one other thing, have you written down the rules yet of your
no,
game?
I haven't. And I have written down the
should.
rules for a different game before, and I know how long that takes, so I'm hesitant to start.
Well, it's not. No, for me, it's not about how long or how difficult it is, but writing the rules, like doodling on the hexes, gives you an insight in how your game plays, because you will start writing the rules with the story, like this is what it is, and then actions, and then what are my actions, because you will have to list them, and it makes you think about what players can decide on their turn, and then you start typing in actions, and then sub action, and then this action can be separated in 3 actions, and that's when you have to tell yourself, maybe I should solve this in a different way. But writing the rules for me is an excellent way to see how complicated or how simple your game is, and it gives you a path to think in.
Absolutely.
So that's
yeah.
My advice for your next step is just open a Google thing and start typing. It doesn't have to be rules that anyone else can understand, but it will give you ideas. It gives me ideas all the time.
Well, that's really awesome of you, Jesse, to join us today and share some of your ideas, where you were at, and also being so forthcoming and transparent about it. I think that's really important, and we can relate to many aspects of what you're going through. Congratulations too on your channel. It looks fantastic. I'll be sharing it for sure. I hope it grows for you and gets you further along and gets you moving forward with your game design because of it.
Yeah.
And if you have writer's block, you can always invite people on your show. That's what I'm doing now.
There you go. But that's fun too. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's really good. And it was vice versa too. I also learned a lot from you and your videos too. So thank you.
Well, thank you guys. That is really an honor for you to say that. And I look up to you guys because I think you've been in the community longer than me. So I just feel like I can also receive a lot of knowledge and wisdom from you guys too in my game design. So coming on this channel and this show was a good opportunity for that. So thank you for the invite.
Well, that's great. It's great to have you. And remember,
we're never done learning.
We're never done learning. And for now, your game is garbage.
Yes, it's still garbage.
I'm sorry. He came up with that title and I had to use it every time.